First of all, Ambassador, would you mind just discussing the history between Uruguay and the GEF?
Uruguay and the GEF have a long history, a history of very efficient projects that have really helped the development of the policy, the environmental policy in my country, but also a very close relationship since the last assembly of the GEF took place in Punta del Este, Uruguay, 4 years ago. So we are celebrating this 4 years of commitment between the GEF and the government of Uruguay, especially in crucial areas for my country like climate change, adaptation to climate change, but also mitigation. And especially I would like to underline the importance of the renewable energies that we started with several GEF projects, and nowadays they are really booming in my country. We have done a revolution in the energy metrics of the country, and that was due mostly because of initial seeds projects within the GEF. Now things have changed and we have a full involvement of the government and also the private sector, and we have to say that this is one of the most relevant examples of a success story in the continent and worldwide of a really good articulation between GEF projects and the commitment of a government in trying to push on the environmental agenda.
And you mentioned that renewables revolution. Would you mind just going into a little bit of detail about exactly what Uruguay did?
Uruguay has been working on wind energy, solar energy and biomass in a very intensive manner in the last, I would say the last 20 years, but most specifically in this last 10 years, we have seen a clear increase. We have a goal that is among the most ambitious goals in the world, and we think that we're going to not only fulfill the goal that we have established for our own standards to have more than 50% of renewable energies for the year 2020, but we think that we're going to go in a much more ambitious manner. And biomass is also playing a very important role, being Uruguay an agriculture country, a country that exports and a lot of agricultural products, and basically we have a potential to continue to grow on biomass a lot.
You also mentioned climate change impacts that are being felt in Uruguay. Would you mind just elaborating on some of those?
Being Uruguay an agriculture country, a country that has more than 50% of its population living in the coast, in the Atlantic Ocean coast and the Rio de la Plata coast, the vulnerability to climate change is very severe. But also the economy of Uruguay is based in agriculture and it's based in tourism. And both aspects are absolutely linked to climate. So the climate change vulnerability of the country, the variability of the climate change is something that we are dealing every single day at an economical level, but also with all the social impacts that it has, because we have our poorest populations live in areas very close to rivers, in areas that get flooded. So there are many dimensions to the climate change issue. Not only that it affects our industry, the most important industry in the country, which is tourism, but also it radically affects agriculture and the life of many in my country.
And you've been heavily involved formally with negotiations dealing with mercury pollution for years now. Would you mind just explaining the agreement that was struck last year, but then also you've got some big news to share from this particular meeting?
The international community concluded last year the Minamata Convention on Mercury, being the last multilateral environmental agreement that the United Nations have been able to conclude. We haven't had a new convention for more than a decade, so this convention comes in a very important moment, proving that the multilateral system is still alive and that we can tackle problems of global importance, problems that are very, very much linked not only to the environment but also to the human health in an efficient manner. So the Minamata Convention on Mercury is also a very meaningful example that the United Nations have a very important role to play, but also it's a never again. It's a never again because Minamata represents one of the tragedies in human history in terms of human health and environment. So we are very happy to be at the GEF Assembly because the GEF instrument has been modified by the Assembly today in order to include the Minamata Convention on Mercury as one, basically the fifth convention that the GEF serves. So the GEF is a fundamental part of the financial mechanism that is going to be out there to help developing countries to implement this new legally binding instrument.
Do you see any potential co-benefits from funding funds that are being administered by GEF in terms of tackling climate change and mercury pollution simultaneously?
Oh, I really see a lot of potential co-benefits between different focal areas within the GEF. And I think multifocal areas projects are the future. And I think with the Mercury Convention, we have a clear example that when we are focusing our attention on one of the most important sources of emissions, which is the artisanal small gold mining, we're going to have a lot of interaction with the international waters focal area within the GEF. And when we are going to focus on another, probably the most important source of emissions to the world, which is the coal-fired plants, if we are going to apply the BAT-BEP guidelines from the Minamata Convention, obviously we're going to be contributing to climate change.